Uncle Jack's Basement. Most people knew Uncle Jack as John Buckley, San Francisco native, fireman, and eldest of 8 siblings. Jack was a lifelong bachelor who did just about everything his own way. He lived in a house built by his uncle, also named Jack and known as Uncle Johnny, the crabby one. No one ever referred to Jack's house as his home, only to Jack's place, or simply just Jack's. The occupant and the house were well matched. It was worn and rough around the edges and perfect for a guy who seldom dressed up, a guy who liked to wear baggy, tan twill work pants and shirts and ankle-high black lace-up boots, the kind firemen wear, and somehow Jack's boots always seemed to be old. His shirt pocket always had a pencil and perhaps a small notepad and a 6-inch metal ruler. The house was located high up on 25th Street on the edge of Noe Valley in San Francisco, just below Grandview Avenue in the shadow of Twin Peaks. To say that the street is steep is an understatement. Ask anyone who parked in Jack's driveway. Pull the handle of the passenger side of the car, that would be the downhill side, and your door seemed to eject right out of your hand, like the canopy of a jet fighter being blown away to allow the pilot to be parachuted clear. Some unsuspecting passengers thus ejected from cars on Jack's driveway landed on the next driveway below, which, by the way, was where Great Uncle Dewey lived. Dewey worked for the city too. He operated the 3rd Street Bridge. To visit Uncle Jack, one rang the doorbell and stepped back clear of the little awning that covered the entrance. This was actually the door to the basement, but it served as the main entrance to the house as well. If Jack were home, he would open up the window that commanded a view of the sidewalk below to find out who was ringing his bell. "Who's there?" he would yell. "Here, catch the key and let yourself in." The basement was dark and damp. Years of grease and dirt, damp wood, and old machinery combined into a dank odor that carved out a special place in your smell memory. Blindfolded on another day and another year, and you would know exactly where you were. Uncle Jack's basement. You had to go through the basement to get to the upstairs living quarters, through the basement, out into the rear yard, and up the wooden stairs to the kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. That was it, 3 rooms. That was it, the extent of the living quarters. Jack lived a simple life, uncluttered by fancy furniture, modern conveniences, and cleaning. The kitchen featured a table and a couple of chairs, a stove and a refrigerator. The bathroom was small. The bedroom had a bed and a chest of drawers. There were a few storage cabinets. Flannel and wool shirts were common presents at Christmas and birthdays. Jack would put the new shirts into one of the cabinets where they stayed. Some in their original gift boxes, all still folded up as they had been in the store, pins and all. The shirts waited in the cabinet so long that the pins rusted, leaving little red circles at the collar, cuffs, and various other places. The shirts with the most rust were the ones given to him years ago. The ones that did not have much rust were recent additions to the collection. His shirts were on the top shelf, the case of Old Crow whiskey on the lower shelf. Old Crow seemed to lubricate a number of Jack's projects. Most of Jack's projects were carried out in the basement. Things like grinding valves or rebuilding an entire engine, welding angle iron, or milling a piece of stock. But the center of his life was really the kitchen. When Jack did something, he was precise. Perhaps obsessive is not too strong a descriptive for his approach to planning and executing a project. Weeks and sometimes months would pass as he thought through his next project. Hours were spent contemplating and sketching plans. He expected the same kind of exactness from visitors. It was common practice to begin a visit with Jack at his kitchen table. "Here, have a seat. Here's some paper and a pencil in case you want to take some notes." As you sat at the table, you couldn't help but survey the rest of the kitchen. Most interesting was the stove. The stove was special. My great aunt Alice had a similar one down and around the corner at her house on Fountain Street, but hers was cleaner. The stoves had a trash burner that also helped heat the kitchen. A removable circle flat iron that looked like a small manhole cover was the access to the cast iron incineration pit. Lift the iron cover, slide it to the side, and stuff the burner with cartons, paper, and other combustibles, and you felt like you were living in an earlier age and doing things the way they were done in the past. Jack even put aluminum foil into the burner, and although it is not combustible, Jack claimed that it would eventually disappear. Bottles and jars were taken to a 15-gallon barrel in the basement. A metal rod was inserted through the neck of the bottle, the bottom punched out, and the glass broken into small pieces. Jack didn't need garbage service. Filled barrels and trash, not burned, were taken to the firehouse trash bin. Life at the firehouse for Jack seemed just about the same as life on 25th Street. 24 engine at Hoffman Avenue and Alvarado Street was operated by other veteran firemen. This was at a time when they were called firemen and not firefighters. No women. Older guys doing their duty lived at the house, the firehouse, just as they lived at home, or so it seemed. The daily pace seemed calm and routine, except, of course, when the calm was disrupted by the fire alarm. That's when the old guys proved their worth. My grandfather, Jack's father, was also a fireman and served his entire career at 24 engine. Jack's welcomed contribution to the firehouse life was his cooking. Uncle Jack was an excellent cook. He specialized in pot roast, and since he passed on so many years ago, I feel safe in giving away the secret to the way he roasted pot roast. Brown the meat, chop, steam down, and caramelize 6 onions, and cook it all together in a Dutch oven. Throw in some potatoes and carrots in the last half hour. Enjoy. He would not let me tell my mom that recipe, but I did in later years. I learned the recipe one day when I was working on a dented fender on Jack's car in his basement. I used to work in a body shop for a short amount of time, and I told Jack I'd be willing to fix his fender for him. The dent was the result of an unpleasant encounter he had with an immovable object somewhere in the city. He didn't tell me exactly what happened, but he ran into a pole somewhere. Jack didn't give any other details, but it wasn't hard for me to imagine how it happened. I was summoned up to the kitchen in the middle of my work to get a cooking lesson. Stop what you're doing down there and come up here. Sit down. Here, have a glass of this, Old Crow. You're old enough now, and learn something about cooking pot roast. Don't tell your old lady, my mother, Jack's sister. This is a secret, and I don't want her to know how I cook the roast. After the lesson and the glass of whiskey, I went back to the basement. The smell of the pot roast cooking and the buzz of the Old Crow eroded my enthusiasm for fixing that fender. But I continued on just the same. The repair was done to Jack's satisfaction, and he rewarded me with 2 quarts of Old Crow to take home. There's other stories to tell about Uncle Jack's house and Uncle Jack's basement and the way Uncle Jack lived, but that'll have to wait for another time. This is Uncle Jack's nephew, Gary, signing off.